So noting that it is 7:01 on December 15th, 2021, and that there is a quorum of the board present. First, we're going to have a roll call for the members who are present, since it's a virtual meeting, just to let everyone know who's here. And then we will move on to the agenda and some other comments. So Daryl Beardsley present.
Matt Beavers present.
And Rebecca, you're up next.
Okay, I didn't know what the sequence is. Rebecca.
No, Lisa's not here today. Okay.
Matt Vitale present.
Okay, so in a moment, I'll just go over some things to possibly add to the agenda. But after we do that, what I'd like to do is, before we have a variance hearing at 7:30 and then a fixed appointment at 7:50. And there are a few items: 38 Meadowbrook, 183 South Main, and COVID, and maybe COVID first, that I'd like to see if we can fit in the first half hour while folks are here for those items. So, but before we start, I'd like to announce some items to possibly be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and then we can vote to amend. So you can see it's, of course, permit renewal time for the new calendar year coming up, and this is our last meeting of this year. So this would be great to have this in place so people are ready to get going on January 1st. And then we have 8 items related to permit renewals and 1 item regarding a septic system approval for a property. So do we have a motion? Oh, are there any other items that people would like to add to the agenda? Okay, do we have a motion to add these 9 items to the agenda this evening?
So moved. Seconded.
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
And Rebecca, you're next again.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and I'd like to probably save those till the end because they're, energy is waning. So for COVID-19,
I'm happy to do a brief review, Daryl, if that's helpful.
that would be good. I'd say a quick review of the data, but I'm most interested in talking about the mask mandate and the regional school committee follow-up.
Perfect. So if I can share my screen, Daryl, is that possible?
Yes, let me.
And you guys see the PowerPoint right now?
Yeah.
Perfect. So this is just our weekly dashboard. This is the average cases per 100,000 per day for the composite of Dover and Sherborn. As you can see, we've sort of experienced a sustained uptrend since November 4th, with the most recent level being 28.1 cases per 100,000 per day. Kind of for context, the current threshold for the CDC for which universal masking is recommended is 7, so we remain well above that threshold. Our test positivity rate for the combined district remains in the kind of 2% range, but just barely at 2.9%. And then this is the daily rate run chart, with the blue line being represented by the state of Massachusetts, the orange line being Sherborn, and the gray line being Dover. So the local Sherborn rate was 20.8 for December 9th. And then this is just the interval data from the state municipality reporting of vaccine uptake. As a reminder, the numerator for this is individual data and the denominator is an actuarial calculation. So we have some measures, for example, age 12 to 15 is well above 100%. And that's just because the number of kids we have in that range is more than what the state would predict using the model they use. But again, speaks to robust uptake in our community as compared to 5 to 11-year-olds across the state. So we continue to see good uptake there. And I think that's really positive. I'm going to stop sharing. The other piece is there is a vaccine clinic that'll be held at the school and supported, I think, by Fallon Ambulance that'll be happening this week. And so I think we'll see a bump related to that as well. In terms of the regional school committee follow-up, there was discussion. I'm going to get the dates wrong, but whatever the meeting was last week, where they reviewed the current status, which is that the district has attested to the state having hit the requisite 80% milestone in terms of then being able to revert to local control. The school committee just spent some time sort of starting that process, so they'll be working on updating their policies and protocols to allow them to unmask when public health conditions sort of allow, and recognize that the current levels of community transmission have not met that threshold, which would currently be about 7. I think one other just important point that was briefly mentioned there, but I think will continue to be as information comes in, some of the limitations we talked about were just if the Omicron variant behaves significantly different than Delta in terms of the efficacy of vaccination, then it may also change what level of vaccine uptake you'd want to see for that to be prudent. And I think we kind of don't know enough yet about that, but kind of flagged it as one of the issues. So I think the next phase is now the protocol group for the school committees working on adapting and updating those, and sort of more to come. But I don't think there's a sort of imminent immediate plan to unmask since we haven't met that threshold yet, and probably won't for some time given the current patterns of transmission.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions about the school side of things? And if not, I'd like to talk about, do we want to revisit the mask mandate for town offices and buildings?
I would say for me, I'm not quite there yet. I think it gets hard as we sort of try to prognosticate, what do we expect and how much differential risk comes from those areas being unmasked. I would strongly encourage district boards and departments to continue to work to accommodate community participation while recognizing we're clearly in an accelerating phase. I think for us, the level of transmission we're seeing is still below that the state's seen in terms of Sherborn locally. So it gets a little bit tough for me to say, we should be ahead of where the state is when our level of local transmission is below the state average, which wasn't true for us for parts of the summer. But I think this is something we should be kind of thinking about every meeting, because this is something that's very much changing on the ground. Matt, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that as well.
I tend to agree with that. And I think the point about the context of the larger community makes sense. It's not just like we're only interacting in Sherborn, and I'm not sure that we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck mandating it locally when you go over to Natick and there's no mask mandate, and the sort of statewide transmissions are higher. I think we have been seeing sort of high levels of cases, particularly among younger people as well, who are now starting to become vaccinated. And so I think, that's another piece to sort of consider in the context. I guess in my mind, I don't see sort of interactions in municipal buildings as being sort of a source of a large amount of risk and a large reason for why we're seeing all these cases. So I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to mandate a mask.
Okay, Rebecca, any thoughts?
I know it isn't popular, but I would support it if you feel that it's necessary or imprudent. I am concerned about the numbers and the lack of potential efficacy against Omicron by the vaccines. I'm willing to see what happens over the next couple weeks, if that's the sentiment of the majority of the board.
Okay, and I'd say for me, I just think I do think masks are effective, and I think they're relatively easy to implement compared to other things. And again, since masks are part of my whatever, I won't go down
Well,
the same
I
path
agree,
again. But if waiting
we know
is,
they spread the spread of disease. They inhibit the spread of disease. So
yes,
I completely agree that masks are effective, and I'm going to continue to wear masks indoors when I go places, and I think we can message that to people. I think
Yes.
us mandating it in municipal buildings is a drop in the bucket that doesn't make a difference. I guess is what I'm saying. I think we should
Okay.
continue to encourage everyone to be masked inside. I think that
Okay.
should be our position, but I'm not sure us doing it when no one around us is doing it is going to make a substantive difference.
Okay, and I guess we could see what the governor ends up doing, especially with what Mass Medical, I forget the name of the association that came out yesterday or today saying that they disagreed with the lack of a mask mandate at the state level, but okay.
I think something at the state level would be much more effective.
Yes, it would make it easier for people to figure out. All right, so if we're not going to make changes there, I want to put off the discussion of public health nurse. Have been gathering some information on that, but really not ready to discuss it all the way through to the end just yet. So I think it'd be better to put on meeting in January. So saying that, I would like to address 38 Meadowbrook.
Thank you, Darrell, and thanks for allowing it to be on the agenda. If you want, I can give the board a little overview of what we've done on this, and some of our documents, thanks to Ellen, address the past meeting that we had on this, as well as that's the floor plan that was submitted today. And the past minutes pretty much state what the final vote was. If you go down to the very last vote of the board, excuse me, just a little bit above.
How did I miss it?
Right. Oh, you just had it, Darrell, a little bit further down. I'm sorry. Right, the agent stated right there that the rides.
Okay, thank you.
Number 3 states receipt of floor plans, which you just showed, of all levels of the existing house. This will determine if a third deed recording is required. Based on conversation with Dan and review of the floor plans today, I indicated in my view, I feel it does need a deed recording, a bedroom deed recording restriction, and Ellen and I worked together with most of the help from Ellen to create a document for them to record. Presently in our discussion, and Dan, chime in if I've made any mistakes here on our discussion, but the basement level is being used as a necessity for someone that needs to reside at that level. And even though down the road, if that person decides to reside upstairs, it right now is being used as almost like an accessory unit, small accessory kitchen, bedroom, living area. But the
Just one correction, Mark.
Go ahead.
This afternoon, and I was mistaken about.
Dan, you're sort of garbled.
You're breaking up, Dan, but you know what? Yes, if you can explain maybe the further discussion you had.
I was mistaken about the kitchenette downstairs.
Okay.
I talked to the homeowner this afternoon, and it's really the TV room down there.
Okay.
There's a bathroom down there, but there's no kitchen down there.
Okay, and the bathroom says half bath. So in my view, I don't see it as an issue the way it's labeled. And again, if there's no kitchen, that's even better, because then there's not an accessory unit. As I mentioned to Dan, it's hard for us to tell people where to sleep in their house. But the way this is labeled, it shows the 4 bedrooms on the first floor to the left, the living room, the kitchen, and a dining area at the base of the living room there. So the way I see it, it could be 3 bedrooms with 2 or 3 additional rooms. And Dan's already addressed this, and the basement, definitely 3 rooms the way it's labeled with the walls and so forth. That I see as a anywhere from 9 rooms, basically 1, 2, 3 of 4, 5, 6, 9 rooms. Although there was discussion.
No,
of a
I see
10.
10.
Yeah, I'm missing one. That's why I'm I think
Three
I'm
here,
missing,
the master bedroom?
missing that one. I
That?
apologize. Yes, 4 bedrooms upstairs. And so with that said, I feel that, it needs a deed recording as it relates to the bedrooms count. And the way it's been worded, I think it will work.
And I just want to make sure I have this right. I think I do based on the minutes, but Dan, if you can just confirm. In this instance, the reason the system was being replaced was there were no changes to the home. It was sort of not, it had its issues with its room count, but the existing system was in active failure. And so sort of when we discussed it last time, what we said is, we don't think it's appropriate to design a flow with an increased design flow and bedroom count, given the variances that are in place. But we also think we need to get a system that's not in failure in place for this home. And
Correct.
so,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah. No, I was just going to say, and I think they're willing to do the deed recording, and I think that will be one of the last steps. They had to correct one of the deed recordings. It didn't have all the information, but I think as long as the board agrees with the review of the floor plan that this deed recording is going to be required, I think we move forward and the owner is willing. I believe, Dan, is the owner willing to move forward with this deed recording for the bedroom restriction?
Yes, they are. And we just totally missed it. Ellen did put it in her approval letter, but it just slipped through the cracks. So I'm glad we can get it resolved now. But they have a 4-bedroom house. They want to keep it a 4-bedroom house. And if you need a deed restriction, so a new buyer doesn't think it's a 5-bedroom, they're willing to do that.
Okay.
Right, or to turn the basement into some sort of accessory apartment
Sure.
that would have another bedroom, would require additional changes. So as long as that's clear. I just had a couple highlights. I'm going to divert for, spelling right there.
Okay.
I
This
think
was done
state
off
should
the-
probably be capitalized just to
Sure.
make it clear. And then I just had this highlighted because the as assessed refers to the assessor's records. And is it implied that by virtue of the date that would be recorded here, it would mean as assessed as of this date?
We can put the date, Daryl, if from the last assessor's record, that would clear that up, I believe. As assessed on whatever date it was.
Right, I'm not sure if that's redundant because it's implied, or it would just make it clear as assessed by the town as of such and such a time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I don't think the assessors count basement rooms, though.
Oh, okay. So then as assessed by the Board of Health, essentially.
Dan,
Okay.
did you assess that too, or was that, because I know when you came in, you're the one that brought that to our attention.
Right, we could reference the floor plan submitted to the Board of
Okay.
Health.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
yeah, since,
As assessed
All
by
right.
the floor plans or the existing conditions.
okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this?
I just want to thank Ellen for the quick work on this that she did this afternoon, and Dan for entertaining information or providing information to us today as well, because they're anxious to install it. They were hoping to start next week. If they get the deed recordings done, they will be able to do that
Mhm. Okay,
based on this condition of the system.
so then are we ready for a motion? If so, I'd ask for a motion to approve the deed restriction language proposed here with the adjustments as noted.
Oh, so moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments?
Just a
Daryl.
question, Ellen.
Oh, yep.
Just a question to Ellen. Do you think we can have it ready for them tomorrow? The changes?
Yeah, I can send that. Should I send it to Dan?
Dan, how do you
If
want
you
to
send
do
it
it?
to me, I can get it to the homeowner. He'd like to
Okay.
go into Cambridge tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I'll
Excellent.
get it to you tonight.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that was the point, to have questions before we go on. Okay, so on to the vote. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the next one, let's see if we can, let's see how far we can get before 7:30, and that would be for 138, 183 South Main. And I didn't notice whether the building inspector was able to log in. I know he was.
I don't see him here, but I do see the applicant. His name is Sergio.
Okay,
So, but
so let me just,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Daryl.
I don't know if people have had a chance to, excuse me.
Yeah, a lot of new stuff came in today.
Yes. All right, well, actually, yes, this came in today. So again, I don't know if the board has had a chance to read it, but essentially there was some work being done on a home before permits were pulled. And so this documents what, this is from the building inspector.
And Derek, could you scroll down to the bottom? Because I think it had Chris's initial email to the applicant, just sort of highlighting that with the existing system,
Yes,
that the sort of changes of this magnitude would require a replacement system, typically.
yes, yep,
Okay,
a
yeah,
leaching pit. So, and up above it does say, you know, that they were informed about what needed to be submitted for permit application, and then the Board of Health had to be consulted in particular because of this.
And
So,
we do have the Title V available, Daryl, and it specifically notes there's no available flow. And I did check the files, and it's a system that appears to be a pit with a line off the pit and a tank in front of that. And I would say it's conventional to some degree, but was never designed under a septic system design flow. That can happen with older systems. An older home is this, and the assessor's records do indicate it is a 6-room, 3-bedroom house. At one point, Chris and I were talking about this. It could have had an addition to the basement prior to any permits being drawn. That would be prior to this applicant as well. But at this present time, the assessment shows that, but there's no design flow to represent that need for the house. So, and the applicant would like to make it a 2-bedroom. Again, we don't even know if the septic system's designed for a 2-bedroom. But they're hoping to design it with 2 bedrooms in the basement. You just went by that one, as well
Yeah.
as.
I thought there was a newer, this
there it
is
is.
the
I'm sorry.
newest plan.
Yeah, so that's the basement level, or the lower level, I'll call it. And then on the
Mhm.
upper level, it would be removing those bedrooms that are up there. There's 3 bedrooms up there right now, and making it a larger family room with a kitchen and a flow-through type room next to it, a dining
I
area.
thought and then there's a master bedroom now here
And
above the
thank
garage.
you. And then the proposal is the other bedroom, the 3rd bedroom. Yeah, and he's, according to the builder, he may or may not do that, but that is the intent, to build it back to the 3-bedroom. But as I noted to the applicant on Monday through discussion, that this would require the replacement of a septic system that can match the requirements of the design flow that the house presents, and that's the 3 bedrooms. And that would require the start of soil testing, getting a septic plan to the Board of Health for review. And if the plan gets approved and no conditions for flow restrictions are there, then once they start the septic system, then the board and I could move forward and approve the building application, but not until that time. And that would be up to Rough Electrical. And then at the point when Rough Electrical is finished, but it sounds like it may be very close to being finished already, then they could do the plastering, but not until that system's constructed. So I know, and the applicant had indicated it's very frustrating, but the notes from the building commissioner and my review are very clear that there was no approval to move forward the way it has been moved forward. So with that said, I just wanted to get justification from the board or any input.
Yes, and so, right, it is unfortunate, but I guess back in October, it's too bad that we weren't having this conversation then. Does anyone else on the board have questions?
I just don't know, does Sergio have anything to add in terms of additional information?
Yeah, I guess if you guys can hear me.
You're almost inaudible.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
No, still, I mean, at least for me, exceptionally quiet.
Yeah,
but-
no,
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I hear a murmur. Tell you what, Sergio, if you want to play around with your volume and then just speak up when it works, and I'll just check again if the board has any other questions or comments. But I think what Mark laid out is really that we just need information about a replacement septic system and for that to get underway.
And I guess just for Mark, just so I make sure I understand, I think this is, we sort of landed this outcome following the Board of Health Building Permit Review Guidelines flowchart.
That's correct. We're down at the bottom of it, Matt, in the
Yep.
large circle to the bottom right, where the Board of
And so
Health
it's sort of-
reviews it.
So the driver here then is, you know, let's see. So it's the bottom, sort of the bottom right corner.
That's correct, yes.
And the sort of driver there is that the living area being sort of impacted is a substantial portion of the existing house, and we don't have any design flow for it. And so in this setting, we kind of don't know what the existing system is. And if it's sort of a gut change and rebuild, the intention of this is then to make sure that the system's upgraded and current.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And so they
I
have upgraded.
think that was, I just wanted to make sure I was applying the flow sheet and the logic behind it correctly. I think that was my only question.
Okay.
Okay, Sergio, any luck? And if you want to try dialing
So-
back in, that would be okay too.
And what I would say is if Sergio is having a hard time connecting, given the timing to the 7:30 and the 7:50, Sergio, the
Yes.
other thing you could try to do is if you try to telephone in after the next two hearings, then at least you can kind of get the audio and that might work.
Feel better now. I just switched over from my AirPods to.
Slightly better, but still difficult.
Okay, well, I apologize. I mean, if you can hear a little bit of it, you know, our intentions here weren't to do anything but move in. I don't know if you can hear me at all.
So Sergio, I think you're so quiet. Let's plan to have you after the two variance hearings, just call in on the telephone link and let's try it that way because I want to make sure you're able to be heard on the recording as well. I find it exceptionally faint. I can hear you enough to hear you say, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I don't know if it's hearable enough to be accessible to people.
Yes, I think it would be better. And we do have a scheduled hearing in less than a minute. So
So
if you
let's
can
do
call
this.
back in, that would be great.
Let's do the 7:30 and the 7:50, and then after the 7:50, have this topic be the kind of what we come back to.
Okay. All right. So Ellen, do we have the green cards for 7 Coursebrook?
We have most of them. 2 of them are still outstanding, but I did track them using the tracking feature in the post office website. One of the envelopes was delivered, is addressed to an abutter who lives in Washington, DC. And the tracking shows from, I think, early or mid-November that it was out for delivery. And then it just ends. There's, no other information. And then the second outstanding card was, it shows that it's being in the process of being returned to the sender. So I would say you could have the hearing and just require that when the envelopes are returned to the designer, that she provide them to us for the file. Because we do have, the tracking through the post office website.
Okay. Right. I know it's very handy to have that available now from the post office. Okay, so. Just making a note of that. to the end. All right. So then I will open the variance hearing, and I don't know if people recall, but this property had come in before for septic system repair variance hearing. And one of the applicable sections that needed a variance was missed. So this is just to catch up on that. So I'm curious whether there are any abutters to this property. We can have an abbreviated discussion, or we can certainly answer any questions that might come up if we make it too brief. And is the engineer here to
I am,
discuss this?
yes.
Designer is Liz Dupre, and she's here to review with the board.
Okay, and let's see. So would you like me to show the plan for purposes of discussion, or I'll bring it up and you can just discuss the need for the variance so that we can vote on that.
Go ahead, Liz.
So this one was, the town has a local bylaw that groundwater offset needs to be 5 feet from natural conditions. The seasonal high water table is less than 5 feet to the surface of the ground. So that's what this request is specifying, that we can, that does not exist.
Mhm. And I will note that we did grant a variance to section 8.01 at the prior variance hearing, which is very similar to this.
Right, there were a number of requests that were approved previously.
Yes.
Darryl, those requests are at the bottom left of the plan, if you want to move it up a little bit. Bottom left, not the other way, sorry.
Bottom left? Oh,
Bottom left, yes.
Oh,
right
all
down
right.
the-
Sorry, I thought that line was the bottom. Let me expand that. Okay. Oh, good. So this one's been added to the plan. We're talking about item 2 right now. All right. And Mark, do you have any particular comments about?
No, I would, this is a revised plan. It had some other updates on the information on how the percolation rate was determined. And it is ready for approval, conditional to this one additional request being approved, this one additional waiver.
And any questions from the board or comments?
I'm good.
Okay. And again, are there any abutters or neighbors who have any questions about this? Okay, then I am going to go to the requested variance. And do we have a motion to grant a waiver to section 8.02 of our regulations?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Darrell, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. And then the floor plans have been provided
Yes, and it is
that were
deemed,
requested.
it's similar to what you just saw on 183. They're updating the system so they can have a 4-bedroom septic system. There's no design flow on this septic system presently.
Mhm. Okay, and did the plans meet with your
Yes.
approval, Mark, upon
And
review?
yes, they do. And I have walked through the house as well. So they're finishing the basement to some degree, as well as renovating the entire house.
Okay,
And there is a second floor, yeah.
all right. And Are the deed recordings still outstanding or have they
That's,
come in?
I believe they're outstanding, so that would be
Okay.
the vote, I believe, to have it conditional to the deed recordings for the garbage grinder and for the I8 innovative alternative technology.
Okay, so do we have so the hearing is closed, and now in terms of the plans, do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of the deed recordings for the 2 deed recordings as noted?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other questions or comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay.
So if I may add, Daryl, I have been in
Yes.
communication with some various people that are helping out the applicant in respect to the next steps. So once this plan, once the deed recordings are completed, the plan can be released for pre-construction with the designer and the chosen installer. Then once they start the installation, I can approve the building application up to rough electrical. It's the process we follow on all these type of houses that don't have a design flow in the present septic. So there's a few more steps, and hopefully the applicant is aware of those. Well, is aware of those, I believe, through the various people I've been speaking with. But Liz, do you know offhand if any installer has reached out to you yet for that pre-construction conference?
No,
Okay, because it will involve you, the installer, and myself. So I guess the next step is making sure they do the deed recordings first, and then the next after that will be the pre-construction conference.
And I will send those deed recording documents to you, Liz, and to the other 3 email addresses that you have copied everyone on, which is the owner and then 2 other people. I don't know who they are, but they've gotten all the notices. So I'll continue to send everything to all those people.
Okay, so Elizabeth, do you have any other questions about next steps?
no.
Okay, all right. Then thank you, and certainly let the office know if anything comes up. Okay, now I notice that Sergio might be still on or back on.
I think, Sergio, do you want to give it one more shot to see if we can get you audible? All right, I see, at least where I saw Sergio dropped off, and the only number I see is Rebecca's. Why don't we see,
Okay,
I guess, can we do 14 North Main and the time in between?
yes. Mark, would you like to?
I would recommend
Review that?
reapproval. Yeah, the
Okay.
14 North Main is the barn area in the backside. And if you went down the driveway near the tracks there, it's over to the left of the tracks as you're heading down the driveway. It was planned for an apartment for the applicant's daughter at the time. I don't know. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Darryl. I'm not for sure if that's still the case, but they would like to renew the approval that was issued like about 2 years ago.
Does anyone
would
have any
recommend it.
questions about this?
And so this is just that it was going to expire and they want to extend the period of time they have.
That is correct.
No concerns on my end.
Okay, then do we have a motion to, well, not really approve, to renew the approval of this plan?
Yes, and and if I may, in that motion, it should be noted that this is the only other opportunity they have. After this renewal, they have to come back with a new plan.
Mhm.
So moved.
Seconded.
Other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye. Excuse the feedback.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking to see if there's still no one in the waiting room, so
I don't, what I would say is just since I suggested that we would be tackling the 750. I think
Yes,
if
you might
other,
be waiting.
other business before.
Okay, so let's do the budget. Just a moment on. We had briefly introduced this at the last meeting. What we've pretty much done is kept the budget relatively flat, except with the cost of living increases and a couple of the other adjustments. And what I'll note is really one of the outstanding issues was that came up was water testing regarding PFAS. And Lisa was going to be looking into that, and she's not here this evening. The other thing is that even if she was, we might want a little more time to work on that. And advisory's guidance for the last number of years regarding budgets is to not include things that are not definites just yet. And then to instead discuss with them the potential for something that might be on the horizon. So the other, and then another factor for right now is that they would like this turned in before December 31st or by December 31st. So I guess my thought is that we approve this. It's following the instructions that have been provided about remaining as flat as possible, except as noted. And we provide this, and there's still opportunities next year if the water testing idea to somehow support PFAS testing in town is something that we want to support later, then we can address that when we've made that decision.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Okay, so
Why,
do we,
when is Lisa going to be able to, when will you be discussing this?
I haven't had a chance to speak with her, but our next meeting is in January.
So probably at the next meeting.
She had, no, Lisa will also not be at the January 5th meeting. She has advised me.
Okay,
Won't
Oh.
be-
Well, why are we not following the guidelines of the state on this?
In what way do you feel like we're not following the guidelines, Rebecca?
Oh, well, no, what I mean is, why are we waiting? I guess my question.
So I think it's to sort of be able to have an informed scope. And I also think, Daryl, if I understood part of your point, there's a little bit, even if we had Lisa and we're talking about it, that some of it would be speculative based on the information we have right now, as compared to what would be operational for the budget year. But Daryl, forgive me if I'm misquoting you.
yes, there's no requirement to be doing this and to be helping folks in town with it.
But doesn't it help us, since we don't have any kind of statutory protection, having guidelines that are being proposed at the state level might actually help us, like to be able to point to them.
I don't understand how that influences the budget.
Well,
Right.
maybe it doesn't influence the budget, so I guess I can remove it from that budget conversation, excuse me.
And so I
Okay.
think that it becomes a question of, I think that there's more to come on this topic, both in terms of the state piece and the scope of testing that would sort of inform the budget. So I think it's reasonable to submit this, but is it possible to kind of flag it as an issue for advisory to be aware of, to say, based on the guidance, we're not asking for this now. It is likely that there'll be an ask related to this as more information becomes available, to just sort of
Well,
highlight that this is out
I
there.
actually think we need to budget for it because we might be more vulnerable than many of our surrounding neighbors because of that, and because of the general chemical considerations, which are, as we all are aware, potentially relevant. And I think it might be prudent for us to budget for it.
So Rebecca, I don't think
I'm contradicting myself, excuse me, putting it back in.
what I was
budget.
saying is, I don't think any of us are saying it shouldn't be budgeted or that there shouldn't be a town-based expenditure. I think it's the question of, at the current time, what information tells us, is this a $5,000 ask or $50,000 ask? I think that's the part that needs to be more defined before we can submit the budget request. So I don't think anybody's asserting that it shouldn't be a piece that's done. It's that its phase of development relative to where we are in this budget cycle is such that it sort of doesn't meet the guidance advisory has given about when you should submit an ask. Do I have that right, Daryl?
Mostly, I'd also note that the water testing of all of the public water supplies in town, and the municipality owns some of them, they will be tested because that is part of the requirement for public water supplies. So there will be some testing being done. And historically, private wells testing has been the responsibility of the well owners to undertake that. So there's nothing that would be inappropriate in not testing for the non-PWSs.
Should we adopt a policy similar to what towns on Cape Cod are doing, where they're
So-
in the place of taking on that financial burden, which obviously, because they're private water supplies, one could argue is not our responsibility, but perhaps our responsibility is contained in the education piece. And what about budgeting in a letter to the town from the board informing the townspeople of this new guidance at the state level, and then people would know about it and they can decide whether to do it on their own, but we have informed people, and so we can't be accused of withholding information, but then we can because of the lack of guidance and because of the evolution, which will surely take place in the next few months as we have more information, then we can adjust our own guidelines according to that.
I think all that's reasonable, but I don't think we have the slightest idea of costs at the moment. So that's the issue for right now. We don't have any number to put in there, but that's okay. We can still work on that. And nothing says that we can't identify those things at any time during the year. Advisory
So
says
do we need to
stuff
wait for
comes
the-
up, we approach them and we discuss it with them. Could be in June. It is not a requirement that we know that right now.
No, but I think it might be appropriate for us to just send a letter. I mean, I'm a resident. of
We don't need to
Falmouth.
budget for
I know
that.
we don't,
No,
that's
but I
the-
don't know whether do we need to consider mailings? Because that isn't free. Should we budget a couple mailings or something just now?
well, tell you what, here's what I propose. For the purposes of getting this budget in on time for the first pass, I think we should move ahead with that. But between now and our next meeting, if you want to map out the kinds of actions that you think would be appropriate, and if you can get some estimate of cost too, that would be fantastic.
Sure.
So-
I mean, I can just follow the lead of Falmouth. We've received a letter in Falmouth as residents having to do with some of these issues, because as you know, Cape Cod is having to face some of the issues that we may have the potential to face either at a private or public level with the schools and municipal buildings. But if general chemical and PFAS are, issues become more imminent, then it might be helpful for us to perhaps get informed of what other towns are doing who have similar high percentage of private water supplies.
So in terms of just recognizing the
Okay.
time, it sounds like our
Yes.
next step will be, Rebecca, you will follow that up to develop what you think is an appropriate budget line item, which you will send to Ellen to include in the budget submission. And Ellen, when would it
No.
be?
It won't be in the budget submission because we need to vote on that now as an entire
Okay,
board.
okay.
But we
Okay.
can address it with the
When we
the
meet with
meetings
Mark.
that we will have with advisory in the
Perfect.
coming first few months of next year.
So let's vote on this budget then, and then Rebecca, if you
Yes.
want to put that material together to bring to advisory. that'd be
Sure.
awesome.
Hopefully it'll be negligible, but it's something to consider because I think that if the most important thing we can do is education, I suppose, on some of these issues that are technically the considerations of private property owners.
Fair
Okay.
enough. So Daryl.
Sounds good. Yes, so do we have a motion to approve the budget as presented?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? Okay, Daryl, I.
Matt Peters, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. So we have an appointment at 7:50 for determination of applicability of EHIR requirement for Farm Road. And Matt, since you and I have both spent a
Sure.
fair amount of time researching the EHIR issue, would you be willing to lead the discussion on this?
Sure, I'm happy to. And what I would propose for this meeting is that we'll kind of, I think before we had a period of public comment that was before I then had a closed discussion sort of within the body of it. And this one, I think it's fine to sort of intercalate more traditionally as we do, unless anybody has an objection to that. And then we can sort of go through.
Well, I have a objection because I thought that the agenda item was to report on the guidance that was received from town council as it related to the release of the plan for 53 Farm Road.
The agenda items as it's listed here. And so this is the agenda and that's the agenda item.
So is there going to be a action,
Yes.
Jim,
action item to possibly release the
No,
plan?
Jim, yes. So what we're determining is if it's applicable. That's the final condition for the release of the 53 Farm Road plan. Is that your understanding as well?
No, my understanding of the final condition was to receive guidance from town council, was not to make, it was to receive guidance from town council on that subject.
Okay, so
And that I can tell you that I called town council at least 3 times asking to see whether
perfect.
or not they could report that to me. but
Perfect.
they-
So I will leave town council's ability to report their advice to us, to you and town council to figure out if it's something to which you have access in terms of privileged information or other parts. That's sort of out of my purview. With that, I would say I'm happy to consider the 53 Farm Road and the applicability of the EHIR for the release of the plans. Do you have objections?
Yes, that's actually what was intended by this agenda item.
Yeah, and so I think this is
Maybe it's the
consistent.
wording is confusing on it, but that's what was intended.
And to the point Bob requested last time at our last meeting, Bob said, you know, I'd like to get this resolved and I'd like to get my plan released. And so I think our goal is to get that resolved tonight, at least from my standpoint. So I'd love to sort of
Yes.
proceed with it. In terms of the framework, what I would propose is that I think for tonight's discussion, we're talking about the 53 Farm Road and the application that was previously approved by the board, that was appealed, that then had the conditions that were required, which have otherwise been met. The last remaining condition is to determine the applicability of the EHIR requirement. And so what I would propose is we go through those bullets. I think if it doesn't trigger the EHIR requirement, then we say, you know, the plans can be released. So to review those, I guess what I would suggest is that I think we could kind of go through in order to say, does this trigger the condition? So the applicant for any proposed project of 10 or more dwelling units, which this is a single dwelling unit, so it does not trigger it. Any commercial industrial development with a gross floor area exceeding 7,500 square feet does not apply. The design flow in excess of 2,000 gallons per day does not apply. Any planned unit development does not apply. And I guess for Mr. Murchison to confirm that there's no earth removal in excess of 350 cubic yards. I didn't see anything in the described plan that seemed like it would trigger that threshold, but
I can confirm that, Matt.
perfect. So from my standpoint, I would say for the purposes of the EHIR regulation as it applies to 53 Farm Road, which is the application before us, it doesn't appear to trigger the EHIR requirement, and would sort of welcome discussion from the board on that.
I will add that a really important part of this for the Board of Health is that we're dealing with only plans for 53 Farm Road because we don't have plans for anything else or any formal applications before us for anything else. So I agree with Matt's evaluation.
I feel the same.
And Rebecca, any thoughts or comments on your end?
In the meantime, while you're thinking, I will note that we've certainly had other projects to which EHIRs applied that were larger, were presented. We had presentations, and the existence of the pre-application conference is something that in my time on the board, I don't think we had ever encountered before. And so that's where some of the uncertainty came from, is that was just a different approach. But we really have, as a board, have not acted on anything other than formal plan submittals.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I think what makes me uncomfortable is this pre-application conference, and representatives from the Board of Health were there. I didn't even know about it. I think that obviously this is new and we need to do this right, and things were well intended, and people have private property rights, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that there are some considerations raised that are complicated and do introduce true public health arguments when we are discussing potential impacts to drinking water and the general aquifer and all these issues. So I think we're sort of, if the Board of Health, and in this new regulation, it says that the Board of Health has to and will, according, follow the regulations. And we also don't issue variances for new construction. So it's almost, those two are internally contradictory. So because of this the public health arguments deserve public comment and information on an open meeting type setting, because when it's a public health issue, it does affect more than just the landowner and the direct abutters. It might potentially affect more people, but it's obviously the abutters. And the timelines here were very rapid because there wasn't a lot of public information provided until we were in this hearing setting. And I think that obviously this is something that we as a board are going to need to address. And I think that we did try to discuss some of these issues prior to the approval of the regulation, but it puts the board and the abutters into difficult situations, and it almost is unfair because it sets the town up for liability. And I think we don't really want that. We don't want to be fighting with the landowners. We don't want to be fighting with the abutters. We want to be able to work together and be able to follow our regulations without and be able to follow them. But it's very difficult to do that. And so when we discuss it, it becomes contentious, but we're actually just trying to address the issues that would need to be taken into consideration if we actually follow our own regulations.
So I think you're raising great points, Rebecca. Marion, I see your hand up. I'd like to sort of comment first, if that's okay, and just see if there's other comments from the board before we kind of open it up to community comment. I think the way I'm thinking about the pre-application, I think we have to parse out a little bit to say what's before us is 53 Farm. And the intent of the pre-application, as I think Marion described it well at the last meeting, is that this is a sort of tentative discussion that may closely align with what the applicant eventually submits, or it may be wildly different. And so what's submitted in the pre-application phase is not an application. It's not a soft application. It's an informational discussion that's designed to allow some influence from town boards. In this case, primarily the planning board, but informed by other boards in town to then give guidance to the applicant. So it may be that Mr. Murchison will say, actually, you know what? I talked to him. I said, I just want 2 houses now. So my pre-application phase on October 28th, it had this, but I've changed my mind. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that what Mr. Murchison submitted was a draft document and not an application. And so I think that until we have an application, I think that all the things you're talking about are critical, important parts that we need to do, Concom will need to do, the planning board will need to do, but I think it needs to be based on a submitted application. I don't think that we're in a position to base it on the sort of pre-application, which is designed to be informational. And I think that we run a risk of a process intended to help have the town have a voice and the elected boards have a voice in that. If we hold an applicant accountable to say, whatever you tell us at the first instance, even though it was in this pre-application, we're going to sort of hold you to that. We're going to adjudicate that. We're going to assume that that's true, I think is a chilling effect for something that as a town, we should want an applicant to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's the reason that unfortunately, the consequence of the way the system is set up, and yes, we can learn from our, perhaps make things better for the future, but the consequence was that it was new information to me. I'm on the board, but it was not new information to other people. So I don't think it was clear to everyone on the board, but then we got into this timeline that basically, some townspeople with reasonable arguments in this case had reasonable arguments, but they were not even considered because it was not considered new information because it wasn't new information to some people.
Rebecca, I think the point is that it's not real information. It was a draft plan. It's not a real plan. We can't call it real because it's not a real application. And so it's not new information because it's not intended to be a plan. And until we see a submitted plan, we can't act on it.
Okay.
I mean, because he could change his mind at any point in time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because I mean, if you think about it the other way, like if the pre-application conference was 2 houses and then he changes his mind and has 5, like I think we would feel differently, right? So I think we have to treat that as what it was, which was a draft proposal for discussion, not an actual plan, and so not something we can regulate.
But we approved a well, and then we learned that it was a big project.
For one property, right,
which
is the only property we have a submitted plan for. So the rest of it may not even happen. Like there's potential it doesn't happen. And so I think we can't go sort of basing on speculation. If anyone in town came to us with a multi-acre property and they wanted to approve a well, we would say yes. We wouldn't say, well, no, because you might develop it later. Like we just can't do that. So we have to base it on what is an actual submitted plan. We have one actual submitted plan. And for the purposes of tonight's discussion, that actual submitted plan for 53 the HR regulations don't apply. And so I think there's nothing else standing in the way of releasing those.
Okay.
Marion, I'm sorry, Rebecca, are you good? Is it okay to call on Marion, or do you have something else you want to add?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Marion.
Matt, I couldn't have summarized the philosophy of a pre-application conference better than you. And I just wanted to add that the pre-application conference idea is in the planning board regulations to do exactly what you said for open space subdivisions. The pre-application conference mechanism, or even the suggestion of getting together and talking about it, doesn't even kick in for an approval not required lot, which is what you have on the table tonight. So maybe, later, if we get a proposal for an open space subdivision on part of Mr. Murchison's land, then we can talk about what was discussed at the pre-application conference, but it's really irrelevant for tonight's discussion.
And I would sort of invite, if there are other folks who have questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand, or if there are sort of clarifications.
And I'll note again, since this was a relatively new situation and there were so many questions about it, the reason that we had that Matt and I did further research on this was to be able to answer that question.
And I see Mary Moore with a question. Go ahead, Mary.
All right, thanks. I guess I'm just questioning at what point will the fuller scope of whatever is proposed, and even if it's just in a draft form right now, at what point will the collective impact of that be considered by the Board of Health?
So I think it's hard to speculate not knowing what the plans are. So, you know, right now, I think you could say, hey, at what point does it trigger some evaluation? I think some of it depends on sequencing. And I think certainly at any point that an open space subdivision is proposed, I think that triggers a whole set of things that include a level of detail, specific information, and sort of a workflow related to that. And so that would be my best guess for kind of the milestone that would trigger a broader consideration is when that's applied. I don't know that the whole board feels that way, but sort of looking at the planning board regulations, once you get into that open space subdivision, there's a whole set of things that are then triggered in terms of what that process is, how the planning board will work with other boards. And so that's my best guess of, you know, kind of when I would expect to get there, because that's a place that triggers a subdivision specific workflow. And then I think that would incorporate the information about what are the conditions on the site. And so if you say, hey, X, Y, and Z are the conditions on the site, those may be fixed and approved, but they still may be context depending on how things sort of unfold. And so it's, again, I don't want to speculate because Mr. Murchison hasn't submitted a plan, but that's, you know, that's sort of how I would look at it. Because we sort of, if you take the neighborhood example, if we had, and again, this is even more speculative since it's purely hypothetical, but if we had 4 lots going down a street owned by 4 different people, we wouldn't say, hey, you know, we need to decide all 4 of your permits before we do one. I think for me, the sort of open space subdivision part or any subdivision part is where it gets sort of more involved to me. Whereas, you know, in the single lot piece, it may be different. It's sort of how do we do that in a way that's consistent? I know that's not a very coherent answer, but it's been a long day.
Well, I would ask that the board consider, you know, if the next A&R that comes forward and the one after that comes forward, you know, in a non-traditional way with non-traditional lot lines and a clustering of septics, if you're made aware of that you consider the, you know, literally the downstream impact of it. You know, we feel that, you know, there's a pretty sensitive resource area of wetlands that surrounds our house, and we're completely downhill of what we think is going to be happening uphill of us. So, you know, waiting for the open space subdivision to come along after we've sequenced a number of A&R lots, you know, might be too late, you know, to really understand that environmental health impact before it's too late. So I think that's our concern. I don't know if Brian had anything else he wanted to add.
I just have some comments as well.
Sorry, Matt, is that okay if Brian addresses you?
Sure. In this one, this is not like the appeal hearing where it's like, hey, this is the bucket. I think this is more like our conventional discussion where you guys are sort of welcome to weigh in, and if the other abutters or the applicant as well, certainly welcome to weigh in.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Matt and Chair and Board of Health people for, again, volunteering your time and what is a never-ending challenge for all of us in town on these volunteer boards. I know your time is valuable, and I'll try to keep it brief here. Basically, my concerns are that the board I understand your position and I understand the logic behind the position, But in some ways, to me as a neighbor, it seems very illogical because we're talking about the hypothetical of what, you know, the developer is going to do in this case. And I can tell you after driving by that lot for the last, you know, 3 months, it's clear what's going to happen over there. We have permitting that's gone on at the planning board level. We have permitting that's gone on at the Conservation Commission level. We have permitting that's gone on through your board. We've had soils reports that were submitted with essentially no accompanying information in July, just like, here you go, here are my plans, and a pre-application meeting that was conducted, I believe, under the portion of the bylaw which speaks directly to open space subdivisions. And none of that is being considered as lines of evidence of what the applicant's intentions are. My understanding is that the pre-application meeting, which was conducted pursuant to the open space regulations, bylaws, requirements, a plan was presented that showed this house, this foundation, this well, this driveway, and 8 or 9 others. And for the board to hold a position that, well, it's not a stamp plan, it's not a final plan. They have cleared a lot of trees up there. They have some earth moving equipment in the yard up there that looks like, you know, Marino's Lookout Farm used to look like, with heavy equipment. They are getting ready to do this. And it's silly, and I think in some ways a little immature for us to pretend like this is not the applicant's intention. I'm also would like for the board to provide the information related to our discussions and our concerns about this hydrogeologic connection that exists on the eastern side of the driveway to 53 or 55, where you have a pipe coming in, a pipe going out, a bank all the way around the whole thing. It's at minimum an intermittent stream. And I can tell you, after living here for umpteen years, that that thing is a stream. There's water in it all the time. And whenever our old neighbor was here and a tree would fall in there, I would ask him if I could go remove it because it would flood into our yard. Now,
Brian, I totally don't mean to interrupt. Anybody can weigh in. It really needs to be about the scope of the EHIR. And I think if we get outside of that scope in terms of other site conditions, since the posted agenda topic is the EHIR applicability,
okay,
the water course issue, even if it's an important one, isn't one that falls in that. Although I think that the other comments and points you made certainly does apply to that discussion.
okay,
So
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was limited.
No worries. I don't mean to interrupt you, and I think everything
That's
you're
okay.
saying.
That's okay. Then I'll limit my comments to what I said before. It's obvious to us what the applicant's intentions are, and whether it's a procedural maneuver or a geometric maneuver or some fuzziness about where something's being moved. It seems to me like we don't have a clear picture, yet there is a set of civil plans behind some locked door that shows exactly what the applicant's going to do. And it's childish of us to think he's going to do something else. And those are the end of my comments.
Thanks so much.
If I can I just comment for a second? I just feel like we've been over this again and again. And I think the point is that it may be clear what he intends, but he can change his mind at any point until he submits plans for a permit. And that's what we don't have at this point in time. And so we're not here to read minds. We're not here to speculate on people's intentions. We're here to address plans that are submitted for permits. And right now we have one plan submitted for a permit at 53, and that's all we can act on. And the other plan, it could be what he plans to do. That's fine. But until it's submitted for a permit, it's not real. It's a concept. And so we can't act on it. And I think that we've sort of gone over again and again the sort of point of that conference and the point of what that is. And really all we can act on is the plans we've received for 53. And it's just the way our regulations are.
And so if there's sort of no further comment, I guess from my standpoint, Daryl, do we need to have a vote output from this in terms of the EHIR applicability, or is the conversation?
Yes, we do need to vote so that the plans could be released, because really that was almost like a condition on us. A little different than usual.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Trying to figure out how to raise my hand and I can't figure out right now. I would like to have more, as this project proceeds, I think it's imperative that we do a better job of following the open meeting law, making information public, and having open conversations that are not with portions of our board, because I believe this does introduce new Board of Health challenges that we haven't faced before with this new regulation. I think they're unintended consequences of this regulation, and we need to address them, but I don't think that we can afford to mishandle the first case. So that's my request. And if we're going to do it piecemeal, I think we need to be responsible about it as individuals and as board members.
Rebecca, I really appreciate, I think, the intention behind your comment. I also want to be really, really clear, because I think in your comment, you implied that there are untoward behaviors as it relates to open meeting law. That's explicitly not true. And there weren't.
No, I'm referring to the public comment. Yeah.
No, just let me finish. I mean, you said, that we have to be compliant with the open meeting law, implies that we weren't. There has been absolutely nothing that has been non-compliant with the open meeting law. I think that the participation of members of the board pursuant to the pre-application conference is defined in the planning board. So all of that is literally adhering to Sherborn regulations, and not doing so would have been failing to adhere to them. So if one wants to change what that process looks like, that's a conversation for the planning board, because that's a planning board process. But I don't think we're in a position to say, hey, the regulation says these are, what participation should look like, but we didn't do it. I think that the other concerns you have, which I think all of us would echo, is that the more transparency and open and honest communication can happen. Certainly that's what we would most prefer. And I think for us to do our job, it's often easier to do that with the totality of information. And I would again encourage the submission of that. But I think it's really important not to say, hey, we did this or that didn't follow the process. Because from my standpoint, every single part of it I looked at followed the process and was congruent with the law. And I think it's important not to allow any confusion in that space about what's happened. And so with that, I would say, Daryl, do we need to vote to release the plans, or to determine that the EHIR requirement does not apply to 53 Farm Road?
We voted to release the plans contingent upon certain things happening. So if we make this determination, then I think the prior one still stands. Ellen, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would just.
Oh, you went on mute. You were on, we heard you, and then it went on mute, Ellen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just make a motion that whether or not the EHR requirements apply, and if they don't, then you can just say, so therefore the plans can now be released.
Okay.
Just so that is in the record.
Perfect. And so, Daryl, should this be an affirmative motion that is then a nay vote says they don't apply, or should it be because I don't think, like, I wouldn't assert that they apply. So I would say, I would favor a motion, do I have a motion?
EHIR does not apply.
Right, to affirm that the
I think they're often done the other way around, but Ellen, do you think it would be a problem to do it?
I think it should be that the EHIR does not apply.
Okay.
And then you vote affirmatively that is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Murphy, before we sort of pursue the vote, do you have any other comment that you want to add? I know I cut you off earlier as we went into it, and I just want to make sure that you don't have anything that you want to say that you didn't get a chance to say. I know there's an issue with hand raising in a previous meeting. I want to make sure that's not an issue this time.
I do think that the better motion, if it's going to be proposed, is to have the EHR determination that the EHR does not apply, and confirm that the plan can be released, to have both of those portions in the motion.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns, Mr. Murphy, or you otherwise all set?
I think I'll hold.
Fair enough. Do I have Ms. Moore?
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to clarify, will the motion would be very specific to 53?
Absolutely, because that's the only thing we have a plan for.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a motion to affirm that the previously approved application for 53 Farm Road does not trigger the EHIR requirements as listed in section 3.1?
So
Do you want to
moved.
continue that to say, wait, do we want to continue that to say, and therefore the plans are released?
Oh, I like that. And therefore the plans are appropriate for release.
So moved.
For 53 Farm Road, I think that should be part of.
Yep, for 53 Farm Road. The previously approved plan for 53 Farm Road.
Yeah, I think you said that in the beginning, but I'll move it again.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
Yes, seconded.
Okay,
right.
so now we'll have a vote and, oh, any other comments? And I just have one. That is just that the EHIR concept is very important to the Board of Health, but right now what we're talking about is when does it apply? Does anyone else have any closing comments before we vote?
At what point do we acknowledge the fact that we are aware of a larger project and the state, Massachusetts state recommendation that when it's apparent that a small portion of a project is a portion of a bigger project, and therefore we have the responsibility to address these issues and bring them to public comment? When do we do that?
When we receive an application. When we receive an application for that project would be the time to comment upon it.
And if I can just add for the board's reference to Regulation 3, there is a section 3.3, all other projects. So indeed, section 8, 12, and 13.2 would be in that category for all other projects. This probably would fall into that, but it still is a single lot, so I don't see that as being an issue. Just it is in the EHIR, just so the board knows.
Okay,
Right.
anything else?
Nope.
Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, I am abstaining.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay,
And Mark, I know Mr. Murchison will be eager to pick up the plans. When do we expect those to be available to him?
They're available as of now, but it would have to be when someone's in the office. I believe Jean will be in the office tomorrow morning from 8 to 12.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, guys. I don't see Sergio back, but since we're now.
no, I don't either. So let me pull up the agenda and see what else probably permits. So we did the budget. All right, so food, let's do permits.
Darrell, if I can, just before we go.
Oh,
too
yes.
far,
Go
on
ahead.
183 South Main, I do plan on rejecting that request at this point, and I'll make it reference to the fact that a new replacement septic system has to be in place for a 3-bedroom prior to any approval of the plans submitted for 183 South Main.
Okay, and that would be following our absolutely standard procedure. So
Very standard, very
Yes.
standard.
I don't think, again, if he comes back on, we can have a discussion with him. Is that okay with the rest of the board? As I said, that would be the standard procedure
Yeah, I mean, that's
for anything remotely like this.
I mean, that seems consistent with the flow sheet and
Yes.
typical practice.
Yeah, I think if he comes back, we're happy to clarify things, but I don't think that operationally changes what happens.
Right. Okay. Let's see. All right. So food establishment permits that are to be renewed, we have, just checking. All right. So, excuse me while I bounce back and forth. So the 4 that are listed here under 2 all require sodium postings. And then do any of the ones at the top require sodium postings? Do we know?
I will check that. Yes, I'm sure they
Okay.
do.
Yeah, they're
The
all
Heritage
downtown, so
does.
they tend to.
Yeah, Heritage will, Sherborn Wine and Spirits and CNL, those
Okay.
three. Yeah.
So is it okay if we vote the 8 in a block?
Yeah.
All right, so do we have a
Well,
motion?
Well,
Can I
they're
just
not
ask a
all-
question?
they're not all food establishment permits, though. There's one that's an
Yes.
ice cream manufacturing and one that's a catering. So you want to do that separate.
I just want to, oh, sorry, I just want to confirm, the food inspector is good with where we are with Heritage.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And if I may add, Daryl, it's 3 through 8. 1 and 2 are disposal workers, installers permits.
Oh, when I said all 8, I meant 3 and 4, 6 and 7, and the 4
Okay.
down here.
Okay.
Thank
yeah.
you. Sorry.
Okay, so it would be, is that clear for everybody? Pilgrim Church, Table 15, Northern Management, Dunkin' Donuts, Rustic Pizza, and then the ones up here.
Perfect.
So do we have a motion to renew the permits for the food establishments noted, subject to sodium postings?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. Hold on, sorry to get, just in case Sergio tries to get in, I have to be able to see that he's waiting. Okay, so do we, let's see. Disposal works. All right, so we have 4 disposal works installer permit renewals being sought. So do we have a motion to approve those 4 for including Curtis Septic, Scott Septic, Atkinson, and Teddy?
Conditional to pre-construction conferences prior to any installation.
Excellent, thank you.
So moved.
Seconded.
Other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. Matt, I know that you need to get off. Is there anything that's, a favorite of yours? Otherwise, we'll do the
I think,
minutes
I
for.
think I'm good to continue.
Okay, so we had minutes for December 1st, and I
have a
provided some minor edits.
I did not have any substantive edits.
I supplied some minor edits.
I just recently sent my edits to Ellen. I hope you received them. Did you?
I
Just-
literally, just 1 minute ago, I received
Yeah,
them.
they're
So,
actually not that significant, but they're important. Like they're little details. So if you could read that, hopefully that will help.
Okay, so do we have a
Quite
motion
a few,
Oh.
yeah.
to approve the minutes as per suggested edits?
So moved.
And just to confirm, Rebecca, it sounds like you have minor edits that you feel are important, not.
Yeah, What I mean is that it's not significantly changing. There was sort of a funny,
Just have changing verbiage.
yeah, there was a statement where a sentence was broken up, so it was really interesting. It was sort of like that book, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves, where it totally changed the sentence, so it's kind of confusing. And it was a matter of just moving the period over, so that one sentence ended sooner and the other sentence, the other phrase belonged to the next sentence. And so it
offered clarity.
Yes, and it's, when you read it, you can understand what it's saying. So it's
Perfect.
important.
So
I
it
think
sounds
it's
like that's
important, but it's not a major conceptual change.
perfect. So I think that's just the key point. Like if we're saying we're approving that as amended and you're making a substantive change, that we'd sort of need to know what the amendment is. I think in this case, it sounds like it's a sort of typographical one. So that sounds fine. Daryl, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I think I just proposed a motion and I
Perfect.
can't remember if someone moved it or not.
So moved?
Seconded.
Any further comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and then we had a Visiting Nurse Association invoice for approval. Of course, it had additional expenditures for COVID. Does anyone need to see that or?
No, it looked really reasonable.
Yes. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve that invoice for payment?
So moved?
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Oops, and I mixed the catering. Do we have a motion to renew the catering permit for Heritage of Sherborn? They probably need a sodium notification of some sort
Yes.
with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So moved?
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And do we have a motion to renew the ice cream manufacturing permit for the DBA C&L Frosty, subject to sodium notification of some sort?
So moved?
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so the one thing I miss about a paper agenda is I could cross stuff off. Have we missed anything?
I do, and Ellen had that wide collection of pins available. There was different colors. It was awesome.
Oh, actually, right, I could do this and just mark them off that way. Okay, next time.
I think we hit them all.
Yeah,
so-
so agenda items, we identified a couple of things. Rebecca will have something for us at the next meeting.
And I'm hopeful to have the one from like 47 meetings ago in terms of the, kind of recommended edits to the document that Gino had put together in the past in terms of sequencing.
Mhm. Okay, and I will continue to work on the public health nurse issue.
Perfect. And Daryl, I'm happy to collaborate with you on that if that's helpful.
Okay,
I think that's, I think that
Okay.
again, I think for COVID updates, I don't think we'll have any new protocols that come out from the school, but I think just a kind of a regular check-in about what the data shows post-Christmas will be really helpful.
yes,
So just
I
kind of
agree.
the data review, but that's all I got.
All right, well, thank you. Oh, we have to have a roll call vote to adjourn the meeting. So do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved?
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Have very good evenings, weekends, holiday seasons, and all the rest.
And as
And
my
same
mother
to
would
all.
say, make good choices.
Yes.
All right, bye, guys.
Sounds good. Bye,
Thanks.
everybody. See you next year.
Good night.
Yeah.